So hi and welcome to FutureLab webinar, FutureLab Live we call it. I'm Hamza and I'm your host for the day, and with me today is our mentor, Izzat Mohtarudin. He's a consulting associate from Frost and Sullivan Asia Pacific. So thank you so much, Izzat, for joining us today. Can you maybe start off with introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, I'd like to thank you, Hamza, from Founders Malaysia for arranging this session on behalf of FutureLab. So, having kept up with Mr. Brian, who is also the CEO of FutureLab and the founder, I'm really excited to be the first feature for this FutureLab live session. So, jumping into an introduction, right? So, I will touch a bit on my education background and also my working experience. So I graduated from a bachelor's degree in chemical and environmental engineering back in July 2017. So interestingly, the reasons why I took an engineering degree was mainly because of two factors. I grew up, my interest was very much revolving around subjects of chemistry, physics, math. So I went ahead and taking up a chemical engineering degree with sort of the misconception that chemical engineering has a lot of chemistry, but boy, was I wrong. Yeah, so the intention was to go into oil and gas with chemical engineering degree. So the second factor, my dad, it was a practicing engineer. He's an electrical engineer by profession. He served his entire career in Tenaga Nasional Berhad. So growing up in a household with him, he has always been encouraging me to be venturing into oil and gas. So combined with these two factors, it was the two influential decision making, I would say, which led me to study an engineering degree in Nottingham. However, upon graduation, throughout my course, I figured out that chemical engineering wasn't for me. So I figured that I wanted to pursue something non-engineering related field. So upon graduation, I was doing some research, and that's where I sort of discovered Frost and Sullivan. Actually, I spoke to a mentor through FutureLab. So I would say largely that's where everything began for me. I started my career in Frost and Sullivan through a 3-month internship from October to the end of 2017. And then ever since, I've been in the consulting track in the energy and environment practice, where we cover markets like power, oil and gas. Long story short, I would say the experience has been amazing. Despite coming from an engineering degree, I feel like this job functional role is extremely relevant to my interest and also personality. So that's great. But I'll be happy to share more about my working experience in a separate session, if you will. So over to you, Hamza.
Now that you're on FutureLab, what actually inspired you to sign up as a mentor? Yeah.
Right. Very interesting question you might ask. So I would say that there are a couple underlying reasons to this. I would say it's mainly, I would attribute, sort of this aspiration to be a mentor because of Brian. I'm actually inspired by him. He actually studied biotechnology, if I'm not mistaken, from a UK university, Imperial, if I'm not wrong. So he graduated, he came back to Malaysia, he started his career in Accenture in consulting. And then, he was figuring out, he saw a gap in the education system. So that's where he sort of started the idea of FutureLab while he was working back in Accenture. So that really inspired me. I really share the same sentiment to his vision. So that's number one, right? So the second reason is, personally, I honestly went through some difficult times, I would say, throughout my education program, being the factor because I wasn't really so inclined in the program in chemical engineering. So I feel very strongly to help out people with a similar story like mine. So if any of you out there are viewing this webinar, do feel free to reach out to me. And then thirdly, I would say, so I see a huge flaw relatively in our education system. So I went to a national school, but also, I went My primary and high school, I went throughout a government national daily school. But during my Form 1 period for 6 months, I actually got myself enrolled into a boarding school, Sekolah Menengah San Selangor in Cheras. So having said that, I really see two huge flaws. Number one is that our education system is not really flexible in nature. And what I mean by that is, students by the age of 16, equivalent to Form 4 in the Malaysian education system, you're sort of stream into arts and science based on your previous year-end results. So that sort of inflexibility sort of inhibits the growth of students. So that's why you see things sometime last year, the government started introducing computer programming classes on a pilot scale. I'm not sure what was the success since. I've not read or heard any news on it. Secondly, personally growing through, as I said earlier, a national school, right? I felt like there wasn't really a proper career advisory service given. So, I grew up having that tunnel vision that I've always wanted to do engineering. I never really ventured into other subjects just because I was placed in science stream class. I was taking physics, chemistry. Well, I did drop biology and took economics. But what I'm saying is there's not so much flexibility. So yeah, those are the reasons why I think I'm inspired to actually sign up as a mentor. So essentially, the goal here is to really understand the basic questions, right? What, when, where, why, who, how. So, for example, what is it that you want to do after graduation? Who do you want to be in the next few years, for example? Yeah.
All right. So, like through all this mentorship period that you've been going through, like how did it actually help you to shape your ambition and your goal that you have today, and maybe that you're gonna have in the future?
Right. So I think to answer this question, it's definitely I should definitely highlight my role as a mentee then and now a mentor today. So bear in mind that the initial goal for me was to be a practicing engineer in oil and gas. That obviously changed for reasons, interest, loss of interest, or other reasons as well. But I think more importantly, really the goal was after graduating was to look for a job that I'm really interested in, which honestly I would say it's a common understanding to other fresh graduates as well. Yeah, so to me, FutureLab really provided me access to speaking to great individuals. I spoke to quite a few number of corporates in KPMG, Petronas, Shell, McKinsey, and even Frost and Sullivan. Yeah, so I got the picture of what's it like to work in Frost and Sullivan from someone who actually used to work in Frost and Sullivan. So that was really added, I would say, added value to the decision making then in 2017. Yeah, and then also I would credit FutureLab. I actually spoke to Petronas ICT after graduating, and that actually led me to my first ever interview that I secured. Although it wasn't really is not relevant at all to my chemical engineering degree, but I would say FutureLab actually gave me that stepping stone, that sort of access to people to get an interview. So you should definitely check out FutureLab. It has unlimited potential reach if you know how to use it properly. So fast forward today, I would say the goal is really to help other people out. As I mentioned earlier, who have a similar story to mine. So reach out to me through LinkedIn or even FutureLab. So ideally, you want to have short to long-term goals. But having said that, it's extremely difficult. I understand. So it's a gradual process. So to sum it up, I would say the recommendation here is to pursue relevant experience that you are interested in, be it hobbies like music, photography, or whatever it is, but also having a focused emphasis on your professional ambitions. Yeah.
Same time, like going through your LinkedIn, like have to do a bit of detective work. I see that you're known to be quite active back then in your university years. Although you did mention that somehow you feel like studies was a bit tough, but you
Yeah.
had fun. You had fun volunteering and like juggling between all those activities that you've been doing. So, what are some of the tips for students, especially to juggle between studies and social and personal growth, in your opinion?
Right. Thanks for the question. I figured so much that you actually referred to my LinkedIn for this question. So I would like to correct, sort of the audience on, I actually started volunteering more after graduating from Nottingham. Yeah. So if you look at my profile, the first experience I had of volunteering was actually with an organization called PT Foundation. So they're based in Jalan Ipoh Kecil in KL, if I'm not mistaken. So what they do is they they teach at-risk children um, English, math from the age of primary to high school students. Yeah, so I did that for a couple of months. Unfortunately, so the idea of volunteering is really about sincerity and whether you really fit the if it's really something that you want to do. Yeah, so having said that, now I'm in corporate. Aside from volunteering to be a mentor on FutureLab, I have also really spoken to some people who reached out to me through LinkedIn, which is why I encourage everyone watching this webinar to actually have a LinkedIn profile, blast out all your professional ambitions. You can do articles. So it's really an amazing tool. It's like, you can imagine it's like Facebook, but for professional networking. So yeah, and then I've actually also volunteered for a teaching gig that will be rotating in different mosques around Petaling Jaya, teaching English and math again. But unfortunately, due to the MCO, things has not, nothing has been. I have not been involved in anything yet. So I'm really looking forward post MCO to see how much involvement I can do, juggling together with my commitments at work. Yeah, so I would say, to answer the question, the idea here is to really prioritize your commitments. If you're a people person and like helping people out, sure, why not go ahead, right? So otherwise, stick to the other two things that you really enjoy, because at the end of the day, personal growth is subjective to every given individual. Yeah.
Agreed. Talking about prioritization and time. So now that we're dealing with a worldwide pandemic at a global scale, what's your advice to students, especially to prepare themselves to the future, basically, because of the current situation, and what should they be doing, maybe on top of just studying at this particular time?
Yeah, I think definitely the priority here is obviously to focus on your studies and examination, right? So I have a different range of group of friends, people who have interned at Frost and Sullivan before. Now they're going back to universities. So some of them have actually told me, a lot of the university curriculum or program, so to speak, actually shifted to more coursework-based assignments rather than paper examinations, just because that you can't physically be there in the hall and sit for the exams. Yeah, so I definitely, the priority is to focus in studies, keep have a regular schedule, habits, have a good habits and stuff. Yeah, so, and also in addition to that, I would say the second advice here is, which is a similar advice that I've provided to a batch of students when I went back to Nottingham sometime last year for a career talk. So these are definitely the things that you want to do, which is to, number one, plan ahead. What I mean by plan ahead is to conduct research on the respective companies that you're interested in. You can be in transportation, energy, consulting, or GLCs for that matter. And also preferably to have an industry that you constantly follow the news on. I personally, so I'm in the energy and environment consulting practice, so I read a lot about news related to Tenaga Nasional Berhad, Sarawak Energy Berhad, so all of these things are really intriguing to me. And then second is networking. I've highlighted a powerful tool earlier. You should definitely use LinkedIn to the best of your abilities. Beyond that, I would actually encourage you to get LinkedIn Premium, although it's also extremely expensive. Yeah, so to continue on that question, right, on my answer. So you should definitely want to use LinkedIn. I would encourage you to use LinkedIn Premium, but it's $59 a month. So it's a pinch in your wallet. But it definitely has awesome features like LinkedIn Learning. You have unlimited searches. For me, it really helps me in my job, because I'm in a consulting line, right? So I have to reach out to people on an everyday basis to have conversations, interviews, and whatnot. And thirdly, I think the most important advice here is to really to have take some time to really do some self-reflection, because I personally went through really difficult times doing it. I remember, 3 years back when I was trying to look for a job, it was really hard for me to self-reflect. I really didn't know, the basic stuff like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. Yes, so you should definitely start this process early. I would say, the huge restraint in the process of self-reflection is not
Yep.
having enough experience. So you should definitely put yourself out there, volunteering, assignments, extracurricular activities. So yeah, those are my pro tips, my hack, for self-improvement. So you should definitely do all of those above.
Right. So moving on to the next question. So the fact that you're currently a mentor, what are the three things that you are looking for in a mentee?
Right. So as as discussed above, I'm definitely open to speaking to anyone with, the very similar story like mine. It doesn't really have to be engineering. You could be studying accounting, economics, finance, but not having a vision of what you want to do. Yeah. So I'm open to speak to just about anyone. Just for your information, I think he's also a mentor on FutureLab, and he is also happened to be the CEO and co-founder of iFlix. So it's the Netflix version, but from in Malaysia. So he was speaking about mentoring. So what really intrigued me about the material that he shared was really resonated with my beliefs. So he has shared that mentoring is really driven by the mentee, the mentee. And what I mean by that is the person really has to be proactive, taking up measures, scheduling the meetups, things that you actually want to discuss. So having said that, I think the type of individual that I'm really interested in building a mentoring relationship with me, I suppose would be traits like being proactive, number one. Number two is always being curious. And thirdly, which is equally important to being proactive, is open to criticism. Because I think generally this is a hugely difficult task. Because I think I had, okay, so I think personal growth really is inhibited by you not being open to criticism. And I think I fell victim to that. So I really implore everyone to sort of self-improve with all these criticisms given by, your peers, your colleagues, your parents for that matter. Yeah.
So we're actually like moving towards the Q&A session. So actually, like if anyone would like to ask any questions to Izzat, now that he's available for everyone, at one point he might be busy mentoring. So if you have any questions, please ask. We're very open for any questions. It's gonna be quite open-ended, but preferably if you can ask specifically on tips and tricks and whatever not. So we have our first audience asking question. It's from Ian Cabell Felix. His question is, how important do you think self-education is, and how do you think if you are learning the right thing?
Right. So I think there are a few ways of, depending on the perspective you're looking at, obviously self-education is a gradual process. Aside from your major, which is like, if you study engineering, finance, economics, accounting in university, I am really a firm believer of lifelong learning. Maybe perhaps it's not something that I'm doing right now, juggling between my work commitments and my other personal interests. But yeah, so I would definitely rate from a scale of 1 to 10, lifelong learning, and also known as self-education, is to know that whether you are in the right sort of like, direction. it really depends on, what are your career aspirations, what are the skills that you want to do. So because in today's digital age, we have, a variety access to so many different platforms, right? Yeah, so I'd just like to finish off the question from Ian. So today you have access to Coursera, you have edX, you have LinkedIn Learning, Masterclass, and also interestingly, MIT actually has an open access platform where you can access all their courses, which is amazing. You have so many things there from like things like corporate finance, engineering, energy related stuff. So I really implore you to check it out. I think you even have like computer programming stuff. Yeah.
Let's move to the next question. We have a question from Nadia. She's asking, can you share some tips on how to become a good mentor?
Uh, yeah, so I think really is about okay, for me, if you look at the holistic picture, right? I transitioned from being a mentee to a mentor. So I don't know how many individuals on FutureLab really has gone through that route similar to mine. But I think, to answer your question, how do you really be a good mentor is, well, obviously you sort of need to have, I don't know, okay, I'm not sure. It depends on the perspective, but I would say most importantly, you need to be a people person, right? You need to you need to be interested and fond of engaging with people. You want to see, you get that sort of self-satisfaction, so to speak, when you see other people growing. So that's my point of view. I really enjoy, giving relevant advice and experience and sharing experience to people so that they can also grow in their career and also personally. So I hope that that answers the question.
So next question is from Shakir Tahir. His question is,
Yeah.
how do you recommend memberships of professional institutions for fresh graduates? Do you see this helpful in your own career as an engineer? I think in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I actually connected with Shaki on LinkedIn. Hi. Thanks for joining. Yeah. So, okay. Drawing out an experience from myself, right? I graduated from my chemical engineering degree from Nottingham, Malaysia campus. So I actually took a 3-year engineering course, which is the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in the US and Malaysia campus curriculum. So the disadvantage that I have graduating with a 3-year engineering course from Nottingham is that I'm not a registered engineer with the Board of Engineering Malaysia. So legally, I'm not supposed to practice engineering. But having said that, if you have spoken to other engineers in the industry, there are practicing engineers who are not registered with BEM, Board of Engineering Malaysia, short for BEM. So that's really an issue that the industry and the board of the professional institutions are trying to tackle. I follow closely with people who are engineers and practicing, like companies, Petronas, for example, who have really trying to change things, change the regulation to make it more stringent. But to answer your question, for me at this point of time, it doesn't really help having membership in any professional institution just because that I'm not a practicing engineer. But for yourself, I think it's definitely, I'm not sure where are you practicing or are you still a student, but if you're coming back to Malaysia, you should definitely be registered to obviously BEM, Board of Engineering Malaysia, to be practicing. And you should also be part of the Institute of Engineering Malaysia community. They host a variety of events throughout the year. Depending on your interest, that could really pique your personal growth. I have through my job, I'm in the energy environment consulting practice. So I've actually spoken to people like in General Electric, for example, who is actually a really active member in IEM, Institute Engineering Malaysia. And he actually broadcasts a lot of events that he hosts on his LinkedIn profile. So I would say it's definitely beneficial. Yeah, so okay, just to finish it off, what I was saying is if you really like and enjoy going for events and meeting people. So because I think irrespective in any industry or any functional role that you're involved in, networking is key. Throughout somewhere midway my course, which is chemical engineering, I sort of realized that it wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it was either I lost interest and also I realized an engineering role doesn't really fit my personality. Uh, yeah, so that's two reasons why I chose to venture out of an engineering career.
Uh-huh.
But why consulting and why Frost and Sullivan specifically? I'm not sure if that is part of your question. But to be honest, to be frank with you, right? I wasn't really expecting to end up where I am today. Now I'm into my third year of my track with the energy environment practice. So to answer your question, right, I would say I chose not to pursue an engineering career because I lost interest in my major, which is chemical engineering. But I've always had the interest in reading news and article related to the energy market. So hopefully that answers the question.
So this last question is from Marini Sharif. So question is, have you ever felt the imposter syndrome when you switched to consulting? And if yes, how did you overcome it?
Okay, I'll try to answer this. I don't know whether I'm gonna get it right. Okay, so Marini said it's kind. Yeah. Okay, so that's an interesting question. Thanks, Chi Yong, for upvoting the question as well. Um, I think when I first started my career in Frost, I actually did a 3-month internship. So that was sort of the cooling period or the grace period, if you will, to sort of, venture into the whole consulting landscape and to really test my confidence whether there was something that I wanted to do for a career.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then 3 months in, I was actually trying to explore other sort of opportunities in the job market. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to find anything relevant. So I went ahead and actually tried to push for promotion to be a permanent employee in Frost and Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
So directly answer your question, no, I've never really felt like I was going through an imposter syndrome. That it was really a trial and tribulation period for me coming from an engineering background. But looking back, I have no regrets with the decision that I took. Today, presently, I'm really enjoying the responsibilities and the functional role that I have. I've had amazing experience with the company. Just to share with you, I've actually traveled. If whoever who has been following me on LinkedIn has probably seen my LinkedIn post sometime last year. But I was actually fortunate enough to travel to Timor Leste, which is actually a country next to Indonesia, a very tiny country.
Cool.
Yeah, so I was leading an engagement on a study related to oil and gas.
Mm.
So yeah, I never really had that issue. And I'm probably not the best person to advise you. A summary of what I just said is, I definitely did not go through an imposter syndrome. It was really a trial and tribulation period for me with the internship, and I was fortunate to actually find that placement in October 2017. So looking back, with an engineering background, I had no regrets. I intend to pursue an MBA moving forward. But yeah, so I'm not really the best person to advise you. So first, I'll go with Ken's question. So I definitely do plan on being okay. So I think there's two parts to the question. So I obviously, if you personally know me and you've seen my LinkedIn profile, you see that I'm in the energy environment consulting track. So, if you see the traditional model of the large management consulting companies like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, Deloitte, the Big Four, and Bain, Usually they take in companies who come into a generalist role. But Frost and Sullivan in my company, I went into the energy and environment. Yeah, to sum up the question, I think it's best if your first few years of consulting to come into a generalist role. But once you progress, you definitely want to specialize in an area. Because there's definitely so much value that you bring to the table. You can even venture into being an advisor to, with respect to your industry. If you're in aerospace, you can be an advisor to Malaysia Airlines or AirAsia for that matter. In the energy space, you can be an advisor to Tenaga National Berhad, Malakoff, Petronas, Shell, you name it. Whatever you want to do, properly plan out the things that you want to do, and it's definitely achievable. Rafiq's question is, what did I do to boost my confidence, right? More driven. So Rafiq actually personally knows me. So so I met Rafiq in my university days. So interestingly, to those who actually know me since high school, I actually was an introvert. Um, yeah. So and then what sort of changed? What was the inflection point for me? To those who are familiar with math, inflection point is when the curve sort of like drastically increases. Was actually the point where I entered university.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got myself involved in performing arts. I did music. I also did dancing. So I started performing in front of public on stage. So that really, I would say that was the pivotal moment for me where my confidence level really transcended to a different level. And that, looking back, that has really helped me to bring me where I am today. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question, Rafiq.
We're moving towards the end. So if you have any more questions, please do check out Izzat on his LinkedIn, on his FutureLab, especially if you'd like to book him as a mentor, or you can just search for this name, Izzat Mohtarudin. He's available on LinkedIn most of the time. Also, he's going to be available on FutureLab, so just go to bit.ly/FL Would really love to actually like answer more questions, but I think due to the bad connection from both of our ends, it might be quite impossible for us to really answer that. If anyone would like to follow Izzat, Instagram would be this one. Maybe before we
Awesome, man.
part, some
Yeah.
parting words, some word of motivation for our audience today.
Yeah, I think I basically covered the majority of the crucial points. But if I were to reiterate some, I would say that definitely plan out your priorities. So that way you can really distinct what are your objectives and what is it that you want to be doing. Second is to always stay curious. Third is long life learning. Open access to platforms like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, MIT OpenCourseWare, and most importantly is that you want to be proactive. That definitely is a huge attribution to your personal growth. Because personally, I've been doing some of those items. Yeah, and that has really helped me in personally and professionally. So yeah, over to you, Hamza.
All right. So now that we've come to the end of our session today, I know that there's a lot of questions that you would like to ask, but due to the time constraint as well as the issue, like currently a lot of people are at home, like watching Netflix and all those things. It's somehow like affecting our stream today. I'm really sorry for any like technical issues that we're going through today. But yeah, that's it for today's episode of FutureLab webinar. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much, Izzat, for joining me today and your sharing your journey. Thank
Oh yeah,
you.
no worries, man. I was really excited for the future.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Rafiq was also saying that you should be singing now, perform a song for us, and Fitri is saying
Uh,
like you should host a futsal session for FutureLab peeps. Yeah, we
yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
So Yeah, for Rafiq's request, you can follow me on Instagram. I regularly jam out on music and I play my ukulele and post Instagram stories. So Fitri's suggestion is definitely something interesting. We could definitely do a futsal session with his company as well, Web Artisan.
So is that quite a lot of demand from our audience for you to actually sing? Like so much now. So yeah, maybe just join him over on his Instagram. Definitely, m_Izzat95 on Instagram. He's quite active there. So yeah, basically that be our session for today. If you would like to see Izzat sing a song, maybe like connect to him. Maybe if there's enough demand, we can do a live stream only for Izzat so that we can hear him sing. And so thank you so much, Izzat. Thank you for today, and really sorry for any technical
Yeah.
issues. And
Oh
maybe
yeah.
just
Cheers, man.
thank you. And join us again for our audience. Join us again next week when we talk about how to build a successful and sustainable startup with Stanley Chong. So make sure you follow and you like FutureLab on Facebook as well as LinkedIn and Instagram to keep up to date with their latest program. So the upcoming session will be on this Saturday, 1:30 p.m. So as always, to all of our audience, stay safe and we'll see you again soon. So Izzat, maybe like a bye-bye for our audience today. Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thanks for viewing.
Thanks. Bye. All right.